and welcome to the Love How Deep podcast with Brian and Heather Mayer. Our purpose is to equip married couples like you with resources that rely on the transformative power of God's Word to strengthen your relationship.
Well, welcome back to another episode of the Love How Deep podcast. I'm so happy that you are here with me. I am flying solo today. It's going to be, it's been a little bit of a bachelor weekend for me. I've had, I'd say the last 4 or 5 days, Heather has been with her sister in Kentucky, and I have been on my own. They are twins. They're not identical. They don't necessarily look a lot alike, but they have similar personalities, and they love each other, love hanging out with each other. And so Heather's sister Stephanie came and spent about a week with us, and then they flew back to Kentucky, and Heather has spent the last 4 or 5 days there, and I'm going to be picking her up at the airport tomorrow. So I have been getting a lot done, believe it or not. You might think I've been lazy, but no, I've been taking care of a lot of things around the house. And again, so glad that she's going to be back. But I thought I would take this opportunity to actually do a little mini series, and I've got 2 parts to this. Today we are on episode number 44, and part number 1 of what I'm calling being a better father for your kids. And then episode number 45, which will come out in a week, will be part number 2. And I'll try to keep this short and sweet. This is mostly meant for the guys. If you are a wife and you're listening to this, obviously take it all in, but don't be elbowing your husband and that kind of thing. Obviously encourage him to listen, but beyond that, don't be elbowing him in the side and telling him what he's not doing right. So anyway, this is mostly for the guys, and we'll try to keep this short because I know that we men have short attention spans sometimes, and we've got things to do. And so that's why I've broken this up into 2 parts. But it's a very important, I think, topic, obviously, because I would say, when you think about typically women and men, women are usually better at parenting, and they're better nurturers, and they're more aware of kind of what the child needs and what our kids need. And sometimes we men, are sort of stuck in our own heads with our own things that are going on. And we think a lot about work and about yard work and our favorite sports teams. And let's be honest, sometimes we don't put enough thought into what goes on in the house with our kids. And so I'm hoping that what I talk about today will help you in some regard. And by no means am I perfect. By no means did I get it all figured out. And in fact, when Heather and I were parenting my daughter, we're a blended family. And as you can imagine, that is not easy. And if you're in a blended family, this can be even tougher. For sure. But it was not easy. That was probably the one area of our relationship where we had the most challenges, was parenting. So again, I'm not saying that I have it all right and all perfect and all figured out, but I will say we're empty nesters now. So we're on sort of the other end of it. So we've had plenty of time for perspective and sort of thinking through what we've done, what we did, what went wrong, what went right. How to be better, that type of thing. So, but again, being a father is very important. And when I think about this, I think about Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4. It says, "Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and the instruction of the Lord." And I think that's an important verse because, I think a lot of times we as dads are kind of known as the heavies, in the situation that we joke around about that, well, wait until your father gets home, and striking fear into our children. And I don't really think that's the point. I think we probably need to work on getting away from that, and so because I don't want we as fathers to be known as the scary big hulking figure that comes in and we cower to, and I'm talking about the kids. I don't think we want to be known as that. And that verse that I just read, of course we're going to, our kids are going to get angry with us. I mean, it's going to happen. If we discipline in the most loving and kind way, of course they're going to get angry. But I think what this means is don't kind of go overboard with it, or don't be poking at them maybe when they don't need it or they don't deserve it, that type of thing. But so how I'm dividing this episode of this 2-part mini series up is I'm going to give you 3 tips for each episode, so you have a total of 6. And again, as a guide, don't want to overwhelm you with all of them at once. So let's do a quick episode now, and then in a week from now, we'll wrap it up with 3 more tips. But tip number 1, and again, this one I think is probably quite difficult for a lot of guys, but tip number 1 is be present and engaged. There, so many times when we've got the TV on and we're watching a sporting event, or we're looking at our phone, or we're working on a project, and we're just not completely there. And so sometimes things need to get done, of course, but I think being physically and emotionally present in your child's life is extremely important. Again, women typically have this one down. We guys can tend to fall off the map when it comes to this, and I've seen it quite a bit in my practice and when we mentor. A lot of times as men, we're just kind of trained to, we need to bring home the bacon, and then when we get home, we kick off our shoes and we relax, and maybe we do a little bit of yard work, but for the most part, we're not thought of as needing to really look after the kids. But again, I would what's the word I'm looking for? I would challenge that. That's the word I'm looking for. I would challenge that because it's very important for you to be present and engaged. Think about your kids, when they're 40 years old and they talk about you. What do you want to hear? Do you want to hear, well, my dad was withdrawn and wasn't really always there for me? And no, you want to hear things like, my dad took time out to be with me, to hang out with me, to play games, or play ball, or read, whatever it might be. Those are the types of things that you want to hear. So being present and being engaged, and you don't have to be perfect, of course, but I would ask you to sort of look in the mirror, so to speak, and ask yourself, am I doing enough of this? And if you're not, then do a little bit more. But, it's very important to prioritize quality time, actively listening. Actively listening means you're engaging in the conversation with them. You're not really just specifically telling them what to do. You're really listening. You're being curious. And occasionally engage in activities your children might enjoy. Again, one of my favorite things that I did with my daughter was read. I mean, we love to read. When she was a little kid, I would ask her, go pick out 3 or 4 books. I mean, there would be books that would take, 10 minutes to read or whatever. And then for, the final 30 minutes of the evening, we'd turn off the TV and I'd sit and read to her. And then, of course, when she got old enough, she'd start to read to me. So it was just a fun time, and I really remember being present and being engaged. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2 is communicate openly and honestly with your kids. And what inspired this one for me is in James chapter 1, verse 19, says that everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. Again, I think for men, this sometimes can be difficult. We men tend to struggle with anger, I think a lot more so than females, the women in our lives. And, I don't know exactly what the reason for that is. It's probably a generational thing. It's just kind of been passed down. I think probably us being the physically stronger gender, we're sort of, I guess as cave people, we were the ones that were responsible for killing the meat and dragging it home. And so there probably has to be a little bit of a tough guy in us when it comes to that. So I think we've kind of got the cards stacked against us a little bit when it comes to not being able to take a breath and just be relaxed, be calm. But our kids don't want to see an angry father all the time. It's just not good. And I think a lot of us either probably if our relationship with our father was unhealthy when we were growing up, it was probably one of two things. It was either you had an overbearing, angry father, or you probably had a withdrawn, sort of not there father. And I think the tip number one kind of speaks to those fathers that are a little bit more withdrawn, a little less engaged. This one probably speaks, I would be speaking to you if you struggle with anger, if you struggle with criticism of your child. And you've probably heard this a lot, but, it's like correct the behavior or, criticize the behavior, don't criticize the child. But there's a fine line there. You have to be careful of your tone and what you say. I would say even saying something like, you did a dumb thing. Yeah, you can make the argument, well, I didn't say you were dumb. Yeah, but when you're using words like that, it could potentially come across like, you think your kid's kind of dumb for what they did. So, I would just say to choose your words wisely, be kind, take a breath. If you need to walk away, this is hard because in the moment, sometimes we don't think about it or we don't realize that we're getting upset. I know for me, I'm a counselor. That's my daytime job. And then Heather and I mentor couples as well in the evenings. And so we talk a lot about just being aware of yourself. There's a self-awareness that needs to develop. I've noticed for me when I start to get upset, start to get a little angry, I notice my chest tightens. Maybe my throat starts to feel like it's got a little lump in it, or I get like cotton mouth. And the reason I bring these things up is that I want you to think about, what makes you angry or what kind of bodily sensations happen for you when you get angry. Does your face get flushed? Do you start clenching? And then the point of that is to become aware of this and notice when it's happening. And maybe that's a time for you just to take a breath and potentially walk away and then possibly come back. Or maybe a simple breath actually makes it much easier for you to be able to express what you're trying to express. And, maybe growing up again, maybe you didn't have a father that really communicated in a vulnerable and open way with you. I know that's a very common theme that I hear, that, again, most dads are kind of stoic and don't show a lot of affection and love and appreciation. So, again, work as much as you can on your communication and don't be afraid or shy to ask your wife. I mean, again, I hate to keep saying this, but I think they do a much better job than we do at communicating. And so ask them, what kind of tips and advice would you give me as your spouse, to help me communicate with our kids in a better way? And ultimately what you're looking to do there with communicating is you're wanting to foster an environment of trust and open dialogue, and you want to model healthy communication for them. You want to be approachable. You want to have an open door. You don't want your kids to be afraid to come and talk to you about things. Now, of course, kids are kids, and it doesn't matter how much you say, how much of an open door you have. There are probably some times that they're just not going to come to you. I mean, I know when we were parenting my daughter, there were plenty of times where I would tell her, hey, come to us with anything, we want to be able to talk. And there were times where she just wouldn't. So even though we tried to set up this environment where we were hoping that she trusted us, again, a lot of times that didn't happen. So, but as much as you can, keep doing that. So that's tip number 2, communicating openly and honestly. Tip number 3 is setting a positive example. And so this is probably a little bit more in the realm of actions rather than your words. Of course, we want our actions and our words to line up, but, you model what it looks like to be a good father. So that might be, it could be something as simple as when you're watching a sporting event, don't be screaming at the TV. Don't be throwing things when your team is losing. Just remain calm. That might be a good place to start. Show what it looks like to treat others with kindness. Maybe you're upset that you went to the store and the product that you bought, you bought a new television and it's all messed up, and you've got to go and talk to the person at the counter about returning it, and the conversation doesn't go the way you like, and your son or your daughter's there with you. They're watching. I mean, maybe they don't realize that they are, but they are. They're little sponges. And so the impact of your behavior on them can last a lifetime. I think about, I used to have an anger problem in the car when people would cut me off. I would be yelling and being animated, and that was not the right thing to show my daughter. I'm much more calm now. It's taken me years. Oh my goodness. I wish I could say that I had gotten that straight when she was a kid, but did not. Lost my cool many a time. But now looking back on it, I realize, no, that was not the way to be. And I guess a Bible verse that really is an inspiration when it comes to what I'm talking about here with setting a positive example is in 1 Corinthians 11, verse 1. Just says, be imitators of me as I am of Christ. And so I believe that's Paul talking, that as much as he can, he's trying to be like Christ, and he's telling people, hey, try to do it the way I'm doing it. But, it's a balance. Obviously, you want to be a disciplinarian, you want to be firm, you want to be, at times strict if you need to be, but you can also be a role model. And I would say that means that when you mess up, just say so. You say, I kind of blew that one. Well, maybe not kind of, maybe you did blow it. Just tell them. I think they will be appreciative of that. Again, the smaller the child is, the less they probably will understand what that means. But I think especially teenagers, when they see you modeling, humility and things like, asking for forgiveness, it could be a very important thing. And they will start to emulate that. They should hopefully show that back to you and potentially to other people. And so you're just really trying to model Christ, I would say, with that last one by setting a positive example. So that is all I've got for you today. Wanted to just get this thing kicked off, being a better father for your children. Just some real quick hitting tips and strategies and tools. And when we come back on our next episode, we will talk about 3 more tips. And I think you will get a lot out of these. And I would just encourage you, maybe you don't necessarily need to implement all 6 of them, but take 1 or 2 that you hear in today's episode or in our next episode, which is episode 45, and then work on implementing those. Think about maybe the 1 or 2 that maybe you're not getting right that you need to work on. And so thank you so much for listening. Again, don't forget to come back in another week, and we will have episode number 45, part 2 of this series ready for you. And then also one other thing, we have lots of great free resources on our website, including a core values exercise. And I'm going to put a link into the show notes. It's a core values exercise. It's something that you can do with your spouse, but also I think it would be important for you to do this as well, just so you know kind of what your values are when it comes to filtering it through the lens of parenting. I think that could be very helpful as well. So check out the show notes. Those will be at lovehowdeep.com/44, and I'll have a link to the core values free exercise. And thank you again for listening. And we will do 1 more episode where I'm on my own. And then after that, Heather will rejoin, although maybe need to have her do one about mothers. All right. Anyway, take care, everyone. And I will see you next time.